If someone you love told you that your years of help were a trap, would you step back or show them what life feels like without your hands holding up the roof? That question landed on my porch the moment my suitcase skidded across the steps and thumped beside the wilting azaleas I used to water at dawn. The bag was the same faded burgundy I'd carried when I moved in to soothe a colicky baby and keep a new mother afloat between midnight feedings and mornings that demanded courage. Now, my daughter stood in the doorway with arms folded and a face set not in anger, but in something colder, indifference. "You're holding us back," she said me, Kyle, the kids, all of us, and called my home a prison and herself the inmate. She announced I had 3 days, said a locksmith was already lined up, said not to make this harder. I looked at the broken zipper, the sweater corner sticking out like a bitten tongue, the handle that creaked as I lifted it, and thought about the first time those hands had shaken as she asked me to move in. I walked past her without a word, the wheels of the suitcase dulling with every step until I stopped at the curb and called Alvin. "Remove my name from the co-signed mortgage," I said. "She wants space. I'm giving it to her." He reminded me that once I withdrew, the bank would give her 30 days to refinance, or the loan would slip into default. I said to begin. Freedom was the wish. I simply let it breathe. The motel off the highway hummed with a bathroom light that blinked like an old caution sign. I unzipped the suitcase and shook my head at the careless packing, then made tea in a cracked mug and opened a lined notebook still marked with Daniel's kindergarten scribbles. I wrote to remember, not to plead. Day 1. Sent away, not surprised, only finally seen. She wanted the house and her version of quiet. But that roof wasn't hers alone, not legally, not by any measure of fairness, because years earlier, when she was mine, I couldn't qualify. I'd signed my name beside hers. I was the one who sat in the bank with trembling fingers and a smooth story, while the small-town accident stayed off the record. A bleeding passenger, a private settlement, therapy bills ignored. I had covered it all and then stepped back into the shadows so she could walk forward without a stain. On day 2, she texted, told me to take my kettle and the old mirror I'd been given by her grandmother. "Too antique," she'd once said. I deleted the message and called Alvin again. He confirmed the bank would issue notice in 35 business days and that, without a guarantor, refinancing would be impossible given her history. I told him to proceed. That night I dreamed of the version where I never answered the 2 a.m. call, never hired the lawyer, never begged the other mother to spare a prison sentence. In that dream my daughter faced the full weight of what she'd done. In real life, I answered, paid, erased, and became the hidden scaffolding of her second chance. If she wanted a future without me, then the paperwork could go first. The rest would come on its own. By day 3, I had my kettle, the mirror, and my notebook lined up on the small motel table. I sat on the balcony and waited for the quiet to settle into something like clarity. She wouldn't need me to explain what a notice from the bank means. Institutions have a way of delivering facts without raised voices. Memory pulled me backward to 20. To the second-hand Civic, to music louder than truth and drinks stronger than common sense, to the tire marks and shattered glass, and the mother in the other car with a 5-year-old who lived by miracle but suffered for months. I remembered the cuffs, the antiseptic air of the hospital, the way time split into before and after. I believed my daughter when she sobbed that she hadn't meant to harm anyone, and I did what a mother does. I cooked and begged and paid and promised, and kept her out of a courtroom. We agreed to a civil settlement, not criminal charges. I cleaned up what could be cleaned and locked the rest behind closed doors. For a while, she was grateful. She hugged like she meant it and said she didn't deserve me. Then gratitude turned to discomfort, discomfort to irritation, and irritation to rewriting. The story moved from "I made a terrible choice" to "the brakes failed and the weather turned." Vodka became fog, blood became rumor, and the crying child faded to background. She told friends she had done the work, found therapy, moved on, and cut off the toxic people. Meanwhile, I lived in the guest room, cooked, walked her boy to daycare, paid utilities during lean months, and covered part of a mortgage still pinned to my name, only to be introduced to her coworkers as someone who helps with the kids. "You're a person," she liked to say, using my first name now. "Live your own life." It sounded borrowed from somebody else's lecture, polished and rehearsed. When she finally threw me out, I didn't plead. My fights were paid in receipts, settlements, and long hours, and I had already spent them. A photo found me on a Thursday. A college roommate, beaming beside my daughter, raised a glass beneath a banner that glittered, "Out with the old." The caption toasted fresh starts and cutting the cord. Comments bloomed under the post, some calling me dead weight, some molding me into a villain, one showing a wine glass next to a pretty sign with a quote in crisp lettering. "Don't inherit trauma. Burn it." She'd made herself an oracle. I put down my phone, picked it back up, and called Michael, my lawyer. "Move forward with withdrawing my name," I said. He reminded me we had talked about giving her time. "She's already celebrated," I said. "She's ready." He agreed to draft the documents and send notice within a week. Later, someone forwarded another post, calling me mold thriving in dark corners. I didn't defend myself to strangers. Freedom stories like tidy villains. I dropped letters in the motel mailbox, one to the lender, one to the homeowners association, one to my daughter with no threats and no guilt, only a line that said she now had what she asked for, and that I was no longer attached to the house in any way. That night I ate simple soup and lit a candle, not for her, but for the part of myself that had stopped explaining. I wanted no apology and no revenge, only clarity about what independence requires. Paperwork arrived on a Monday, manila and heavy, my name above hers, my signature beside a loan that had survived on my promise. Michael confirmed what I already knew. She couldn't refinance with missed payments and a defaulted cafe loan in her past. 30 days from notice. After that, foreclosure could begin. "She had a party," I said. "She thinks this is freedom." Michael asked one more time if I was sure. I pulled out an old photo of her at 16 and thought about what I had already paid: money, time, dignity, and said I wasn't trying to break her, only to show her the weight I had carried. "She wanted the storm to end," I said. "She forgot I was the one holding the umbrella." When the bank's letter reached her, my phone filled with missed calls and voicemails climbing in panic. I waited until her voice cracked with fear instead of anger. Then I called back. "What did you do?" she demanded. I kept my tone even. "What you asked?" I said. I stepped out. She accused me of punishment. I said I was only letting truth stand. Houses are math. Promises on paper do not bend to slogans. She told me I was ruining her, and I said the ruin was not mine to deliver. She warned she'd go to court. I told her that if she did, all the records would be there, because I'd already submitted the files that everyone had been spared from seeing. The police report, the settlement, the notes she wrote when honesty still outweighed pride. The line went quiet. The next morning, I walked the envelope to the courthouse myself, not out of spite, but to respect the system she planned to sway. Courts and lenders deserve facts. A week later, the notice went up on the door. Foreclosure in 30 days, inspection pending. She called to say there was paper stuck to the front of the house and that she had kids and nowhere to go. It was the first time she said, "we." I didn't return the call. Instead, I mailed a note to her oldest. "I'm sorry you have to move again. You are loved, you are strong, you are not alone." I watched the news clip of a quiet suburban home and a flapping notice by a white door. I recognized the wind chime I'd hung, now tangled and still. "You once called me shelter," I whispered. "I stepped away so you could feel rain." In court, marble made the room feel colder than air can manage, and we sat across a distance that used to be a cradle. The judge spoke about foreclosure and the child's need for a stable bed. Her lawyer offered assurances. I offered no speeches. The court reviewed my petition for temporary guardianship with school pickups, medical forms, and references. My daughter said I was stealing. I said a bank had taken the house and that a child is not property. I told the judge I wanted her to succeed and that I would hold him only until she could. 90 days were granted, with review each month and supervised visits until housing returned. In the hallway, she sat small and empty. I told her I wasn't trying to win, only to keep a child warm. "I'm not your enemy," I said, "but I won't let him become your excuse." As I walked away, she asked if he would hate her. "No," I said, "but he will remember the hand he held when the storm came." The first public crack came from a quiet blog written by the aunt of the boy in that other car. No blame, no bait, just a patient recollection of a family that learned to live around injuries while a young woman drove drunk and a mother paid to make the mess disappear. She wrote that she'd stayed silent for the child's sake, but couldn't watch a woman build a life online about healing while cutting loose the person who kept her life intact. The post spread fast. People found the foreclosure notice and court filings, and the brand my daughter built around coaching and growth collapsed under questions no script could answer. Comments turned up under every video and quote she'd ever posted. She disabled replies, deleted content, watched partners pull away, and tried an apology through tears about narratives and mental health. The timing, years after harm, minutes after exposure, hollowed it out. Reporters called. I said no. A camera crew knocked. I told them this wasn't a story to dress up, it was a life to keep living. 3 days after the blog went wide, my daughter called again, hoarse and frantic, asking if Laurel was lying. No, I said. She's remembering. My daughter insisted she had changed, that she'd planned to tell the truth. I said she'd had 100 chances. When she asked what to do, I told her to let the storm move through instead of trying to outrun it. She asked if I hated her. I said no, but I wouldn't shield her from this. I had saved her from one crash. This one was hers to walk out of. After that, the internet fell quiet, or maybe I stopped listening. Rumors said she left town or changed her name. I didn't check. The truth isn't a weapon. It's a window, and if someone won't open it, the wind will find a way. On the morning of the auction, I sat across the street with a chipped tulip cup steaming in my hand, while the house stood with boarded eyes and tall, untended grass. The blue ceramic bells of the wind chime lay knotted on the porch, silent until the breeze pushed a faint clink out of them. Beside me, Kyle Jr. knelt with chalk, tongue peeking out in concentration, drawing suns, and crooked roofs and smiles that don't know yet what mortgages cost. He didn't need to learn what cash buyers only meant, or why a man in a navy suit clipped papers to a mailbox. He needed warmth, a steady meal, and a sidewalk that said yes to color. I watched him draw a figure with a wide dress and a cup. "That's you," he said, and asked me to add something. I drew an umbrella. "For rain," I told him. We sat there for a long time, just making small beauty on cracked cement in front of a structure that once played at being a home. I remembered birthdays and late cakes and dish towels pressed to my face to muffle tears, the early laughter before it grew scarce, the quiet distance that arrived later when love became logistics and I became Elaine in my own kitchen. Still I stayed, not out of blindness, but because sometimes you hold sharp edges carefully and hope they forget how to cut. "What happens if no one buys it?" he asked. "Then it waits," I said. Houses aren't sad when they're empty. They're resting. I didn't stay to see a sale. It didn't matter if a young couple or a company took it, because that place had never been mine. It was a debt repaid, a shelter loaned, a chapter finished. I had held storms back without applause. Now I let the weather do its work. Not to watch anyone drown, but because sometimes the lesson lives in the water itself. I set the cup beside the chalk and told him it was time to go. "Can we come back?" he asked. "Maybe," I said, "but this story's done." We walked past the sign and the tangled bells that finally sang once as the wind rose, and I thought about everyone told they were a burden in rooms they kept warm. If you've ever been pushed out of a life you helped build, told you were the weight, told your years were an anchor, if your patience was misread as weakness and your age treated like an expiry date, hear this. Truth does not shout. It stays. It lasts through denials and slogans, through clean narratives that erase the hands that cleaned the table. It lives in the woman who remembers every name she forgave, in the grandmother who rocked a child while someone else spoke about growth, in the quiet person who noticed and never forgot. This is Grandma True Stories, a space for voices our culture tries to age out of the room. Not to beg for pity or to rage for revenge, but to speak plainly and fully. Here we share what was given and what was taken, what work looked like when no one was filming, what dignity sounds like when it doesn't need volume. These are the stories that don't trend but do endure, the kitchen whispers after bedtime, the porch recollections, the steady truth held in shaking hands with steady voices. Some will make you cry, some will make you angry, Some will feel like a key turning in a lock you thought was rusted shut. If you know that silence can carry power, that wisdom doesn't measure itself in decibels, and that some truths need years before they bloom, then stay. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories, because some endings arrive without applause, some storms teach more than they take, and some women don't chase the last word, they hold the final truth.